welcome to the channel. Today I want to bring to you a reconstruction of the Daft Punk song Daft Punk. And what gave me a little push to finally bring some Daft Punk song to the channel was that I got my hands into one of these. I first got to know the TB-03 by the Swedish software Rebirth in the early 2000s. I had no idea where these acid sounds were coming from, but once I started to be more and more interested in electronic music, I got to know a little bit about the story of this little machine, or its original embodiment, his older brother, the TB-03 bassline. This device was originally intended for musicians that were doing lonely gigs in the night, and it was a completely commercial failure in that sense. Its quirky way of programming a sequence and unrealistic resonant sounds didn't resonate well with the original target audience for this device, but some creative musicians appropriated this instrument in Chicago, giving birth to a whole new music genre now known as acid. This video will be roughly divided into 3 parts. On the first part I will show you how the bass line is programmed in the TB-03. Then I will give you an overview of my drum machine programming, and last but not least I will show you one way of doing the sound design for the lead synth in this song, for which I used the Mini Moog and the Erica synth Acid Box 3. So without further ado, let's jump into it. The quirky way of programming a bass line in this machine, where you have to originally first enter the amount of notes you were playing and then the pitch for the notes and then programming your accents or slides, actually resulted in some happy accidents that, when performed alongside with the control for the cutoff frequency in your filter and also a very resonant emphasis here that you can modulate along the way, created a whole new aesthetic. And in this particular unit you also have overdrive and delay, which are very nice additions to the package, meaning that the overdrive here actually really contributes to the acid pH of this bass line. I will try to show you now step by step how to program this bass line, and you can pause along the way if you want to reproduce this song in your TB-03 or any other similar device or plugin that you might have at home. The song tempo should be 111 BPM. However, when I tried to record this and compare to the original recordings, something didn't sound right. The sound was going out of sync. So this is either due to tempo variations on the swing parameter, or it might be some analog tape time warping. But for the sake of this exercise, let's stick with 111. And in the recording of the introduction, I actually used trigger in input to synchronize the TR8S as my master clock and the TB-03 as the follower. So in order to create this patch in your TB-03, you will need to change the device to the right position, and you should choose a slot in your memory. In my case here, I've used bank A and B, and I'm using slot 6. Then you engage the pitch mode. So now I will tell you how to program step by step in a sequence of 16 steps. Step 1, it's a G tuned 1 octave down. Step 2, it's an A sharp tuned 1 octave up. Step 3, it's a G marked as a slide. Step 4, F tuned 1 octave up. Step 5, it's a D sharp tuned 1 octave up, marked as an accent and a slide. Step 6, it's a C sharp 1 octave down, accentuated. Step 7, it's a C sharp 1 octave down, accentuated, marked as a slide. Step 8 is a C sharp accentuated. Step 9 is a D sharp 2 octaves up, marked as a slide. Step 10, it's a D sharp 1 octave down. Step 11, it's an F tuned to 1 octave up and marked as a slide. Step 12, it's a G tuned 1 octave up, accentuated, also marked as slide. Step 13 will be a G sharp, 1 octave down. Step 14, it's a G tuned 1 octave down, marked as a slide. Step 15 will be a C tuned 1 octave down, marked as a slide. And finally, step 16 will also be a G marked as slide. If you captured all well, your patch should be sounding somewhat like this. Another important aspect is that my waveform is set to sawtooth. The tuning is at 12 o'clock, which means the exact tuning that you have programmed your unit for. You can of course play with a filter resonance and cutoff frequency. My envelope is set to around 1 o'clock. The decay almost all the way down to 4 o'clock. My accent volume, it's around 12. One aspect that is crucial for me is the overdrive, and you can test all the different overdrives in the unit, but my saturation value here is set to around 2.5, half past 2 o'clock here. I'm also using delay, so my time in delay is around 10 o'clock and the feedback is slightly over 9 o'clock. The bass groove for the introduction was made on the TR8S, and it's basically constituted of a bass kick on steps 1, 5, 9 and 13, followed by snare drums on steps 5 and 13, as well as a hand clap on the exact same steps. And the funky groove happens on the close hi-hats on steps 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11, with a fast groove here alternating between accents and quieter steps, and then steps 13 and 15. And last but not least, I have added a melodic rhythm in steps 1, 5, 9 and 13 to accentuate the bass that is played in every kick on the 4 on the floor rhythm. This is where I want to spend more time with you today, around the sound design for the lead synth in Daft Punk that sounds somewhat like this. First I want to show you a little bit of my setup here. So I'm using the Mini Moog to create the Y effect sound, and of course that's where my sound sources are, but I'm running all of these through an external effect unit, the Erica Synths Acid Box 3, and this is functioning as my external filter unit. I did a lot of experimentation when designing this sound, and of course I wanted to make use of the gear I have at home here, but while recording this video for you, I actually stumbled upon an incredible video by Anthony Marinelli, the guy behind many hit songs such as Michael Jackson's Thriller album, and he tackled this sound directly by taking the Korg MS-20 and using as an external unit a Boss overdrive pedal to add saturation to the mix. But I still think I learned a lot of good lessons here that I wanted to share with you, and of course I wanted to use my own gear and put this little baby to use, and which better song to test the Acid Box than one of the acid classics by Daft Punk. At the core of this sound, what we have here is this Y effect. And what is doing this is a modulation of a low pass filter cutoff frequency that is resonating quite a lot. And the modulation here is done by an envelope that has attack, decay and sustain, as well as keyboard tracking. And in my case here of this modern unit, I also have aftertouch. So all of this can create the basic mechanics of this sound, which is this wah effect. But more than this sound is super saturated, as if I was using an overdrive. And that's exactly what I can use here in the Mini Moog to feed back the external sound back into the unit, creating this overload. But also this box here can be quite evil and add a lot of saturation to the mix. However, if you have watched Marinelli's video, despite of the low pass filter being this driver for the wah effect, you also have that broken radio sound that is characteristic of a high pass filter, which he has in the MS-20, but I don't in the Mini Moog. And that's where this box comes into the play, because here I actually have a band pass filter, and this is what is creating that broken speaker sensation. Let me bypass the effect here so you hear purely the Moog sound. Now with the acid box engaged. So you see that the acid box brings that band pass filter, but also saturates quite a lot the sound. So let's dissect how this sound is made here. First, having a look at my sound sources. I'm using my first oscillator as saw up, tuned to 8 feet. And this is the louder sound I have in my mixer, with slightly more than 7 in the volume there. So that's my main sound source. Oscillator 2 is also a saw up, but this one is tuned to 32 feet instead. This is the sound that you hear, the very low sound that you hear when I bypass the acid box. And I have added this bass for 2 main reasons. One is because just by slightly detuning oscillator 2 from oscillator 1, I get this phasing effect or this vibration in pitch. That when exposed both to the feedback but also to the saturation from the acid box will make my distortion fat and heavier. And last but not least, to increase to that vibration, I have actually added oscillator 3 now to saw down, also tuned to 8 feet here, but with a very low volume. So the main task of this oscillator is to increase the oscillation, increase the vibration that is natural of analog systems. And then if we start moving towards the filter section, I have engaged feedback quite a lot to help on the saturation. What this feedback does is to take the output of my VCA and feed it back into the mixer, and this will create a loop that saturates quite a lot my sound. And then if we look here on the filter section, the first thing that you will notice is that I'm engaging keyboard tracking in number 1, and this will open my cutoff frequency for the low pass filter. The higher notes I go, the higher pitch I go on my keyboard. But this is like the 1:2 proportion, not so aggressive influence of the keyboard placement to the cutoff frequency. My cutoff frequency for the low pass filter is quite closed, a little bit more than -3, and my emphasis or resonance is set quite high, also almost to the value of 6. And those two together, when modulated, is that creates the wah sound. Even when the acid box is disengaged. Here in the amount of contour, what you see is how much influence my filter envelope will do to the cutoff frequency, and my value there is set to 5 of 10. But here in the filter envelope is where the magic happens. What you have to do to achieve the wah effect is fine-tuning between your filter envelope modulation, attack and decay. And it is within the proportion of those two that you can get the wah effect, as long as you have enough resonance from your filter. My sustain level is just the spice that I need to create and release the wah effect depending on how long do I hold a note here. So the way you play will also be a big factor on how this will sound in the end. I will not talk too much about the envelope in the Mini Moog because this one usually has a strange behavior that you cannot relate to modern instruments. But basically I'm using this envelope here almost as release. My value for decay here is almost a second, but this decay is now engaged so that it works as release, and you see that my sustain level is quite high as well. But the last spice that you will need for this sound, it's actually to engage glide or legato between your notes, and that's mainly on the jump when you are in the very low octave here, and it will restart your riff now. So that movement is what the glide is adding to the equation here. But designing this sound was a lot on try and error. And that's because when you engage two different filters, it becomes quite hard to understand what is modulating what. This little box here offers you two options of filter that goes either to bandpass or low pass filter. And you have two basic ways to modulate it, which is using an LFO with multiple waveforms, but also using an envelope that is activated by your input. So basically the louder the sound that goes into here, that's the cue for triggering your envelope that will modulate cutoff frequency and also your resonance. But as I said, this box is playing the role of my high pass filter, and that's why I'm using it in band pass up there. So let me engage it again so you have a listen. And what is going on here is whenever I trigger a sound, you can see here that the LED is lighting, and this is kicking off an envelope that will modulate my cutoff frequency in the acid box. You will hear also an extra resonance there that is added in this filter, and this one is called acid for a reason, like it really saturates your sound. My modulation level for the envelope is cranked all the way up, so I get even more of the wah based on the sensitivity and the input from the Mini Moog. And you really have to tame the level of your input here, otherwise you clip fairly easy with this unit there. But at certain points I didn't know if it was this envelope that was controlling what I was doing in the sound or this envelope here. So I kind of created a difficult situation for myself with this envelope that is triggered by the intensity of the Moog. But I think when I routed Aftertouch to also modulate my original wah sound, and I added this very low tuned oscillator, the final result was quite interesting. You can hear the extra buzzing of the resonance every time I press the key a little bit too far, activating the Aftertouch. So it brings a lot of expression to this patch. I really liked it. Of course, in the original recording from Daft Punk, there's tons of modulations. These guys have a super organic, funky taste to their music. This is just a poor man's studio sound design version of that classic. But I still had a lot of fun finally putting this external filter to use in a unit that doesn't have a high pass filter option. And I hope that this also encourages you to try out recreating your favorite songs even if you don't have the exact same gear. So this is it for the exercise of today. I hope you have enjoyed it. I thank you all for watching my videos and subscribing to the channel. Special thanks for Gillian to encouraging me to jump into Daft Punk. And as always, thanks for watching.